This is episode 5, entitled Rest and Play, Netflix, Sign Language, and Escape Rooms. The best experience of my life has to be Hello world, welcome to the show We Work, Rest and Play. This is where we dissect, decipher and demystify people's work and their lives outside of work. I'm Dan, your host, and welcome to episode 5. Life isn't just about work, nor should it be. And so we move on to Rest and Play, where we explore how we can recharge and have a bit of fun in spite of the daily hustle and bustle of our lives. And so we continue to chat with Dr. Sunny. And after having dissected her work life in the previous 2 episodes, we shall now find out what a hospital emergency department doctor gets up to for rest and play. And so for rest, we talk about Sunny's second part-time job she does out of sheer interest, which is being one of those emergency doctors that fly around in helicopters. Very cool. We also touch on sleep patterns and her breakfast routine. We then move on to play, where we have a chat about Netflix, scavenger hunts, traveling in Nepal, sign language, and escape rooms. And so, I hope you've been waiting for this one to arrive. On to episode 5. Please enjoy. Gotta love the rhymes. Okay, just before we actually go into the rest bit, I'll call it a work/rest play transition question. I was actually wanting to ask. I know I don't think Dennis has a specific one. The person I interviewed in episode 1. So, but I will ask this question here to Sunny. Are there any projects or ventures or sort of side businesses or anything like that that you pursued on the side in addition to your day job?
I guess it's sort of an extension of my day job.
Right.
But I have worked for CareFlight as a retrieval doctor, and the only reason I can do that is actually because of my training as an emergency specialist.
Right.
That's why I call it an extension. But it's quite different to the hospital work. For one thing, CareFlight is a non-profit organisation, so it's a non-government sort of job. But it's more on the front lines. So that job in particular involves getting in a helicopter and turning up to specific accident sort of scenes at the time that they're occurring, taking the patients to your nearest trauma hospital.
Very cool. I mean, of course, trauma is not cool, but the fact that, so you are literally the doctor in the helicopter.
Yeah.
When, for example, someone falls off a cliff, they need a helicopter in, you jump in a helicopter.
So, there's different, different organisations which provide helicopters in the Sydney Basin.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the Westmead helicopters. There's the ambulance.
Westmead is in Westmead Hospital.
Oh, sorry, not Westmead. I beg your pardon. Westpac.
Oh, Westpac
helicopters.
As in the bank.
Yes, they sponsor it. So
okay.
There's the Westpac chopper. There's the ambulance run choppers.
Yep.
And there's the CareFlight choppers, and then there's also another organisation that does it up towards Newcastle area.
Oh.
So there's a few.
Oh.
And in all of those, there are doctors involved, but it is certainly not just the doctors. Paramedics do a lot of work with that. And when you see, you might see on the news someone, like you said, getting rescued because they fell off a cliff or something and they're being winched onto a helicopter, it's often going to be the paramedics. And sometimes the doctors who are doing that sort of work.
Okay, a couple of questions. I'll stop you there. What exactly is meant by paramedic? Often they're in ambulances and stuff. What is a paramedic versus, I don't know, actually, we'll start there. What does paramedic actually mean?
So, it's sort of the equivalent of being an ambulance officer. So just as much as someone who turns up in a fire truck in the uniform is going to be the fireman, someone who comes to you when the ambulance is called are going to be paramedics.
Now, but there are people in the ambulance who are also not paramedics, but they're, I don't know, ambulance, like they are people who still provide first aid, but not necessarily paramedics. Can you get into that situation?
Yeah, there's different levels of paramedics. So there are ambulances that are staffed with paramedics with different levels of skill. So they're all paramedics.
Oh, right. Okay.
But if you are calling O and an ambulance comes to you, it is a New South Wales ambulance, then it's going to be paramedics on board who, depending on what the problem is, they will send differently staffed ambulances to you. So some of them will be the absolutely highest trained ones who are like on the helicopters, for example, who are able to do a lot of things that aren't even on the paramedic skill, but I have got to do with helicopter training.
Right.
Whereas you may also get the people who are, I can't actually remember what, I think they call it P1, P2, P3, something like that. And so they will have the more basic paramedic skills of stabilization and triage and that sort of thing.
So paramedic is another word for ambulance officer.
Yeah.
Okay. So you wouldn't have an ambulance without any paramedics on board. They're all paramedics.
Yeah. So the paramedics will basically even the person who's driving the ambulance will be a paramedic.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So pardon me. Then that was my ignorance there. But there you go. I've learnt another new thing. Now the care flight work that you have done and are doing, that's volunteer work, is it?
No, it's paid work.
Right.
So the different organisations are funded in different ways.
Yeah.
So there is one funded by the government, which is the New South Wales Ambulance Service helicopters. It's just that happens that the one that I worked for was with Kevlar.
Great. And you do that in addition to your day job. Wow. Okay. And is that a weekly thing or monthly thing?
At the moment, it's on a casual basis.
Right.
But a lot of critical care trainees, so this is anaesthetics, intensive care, emergency doctors in training, so registrars, do retrieval as part of their training. It's not mandatory, but they do because the people who are able to stabilise these critically ill people from the scene to the hospital tend to be the people who have the skills in the critical care areas.
Okay. And what decides whether Care Flight gets the call, Westpac sponsored one, or when you
very complex rules on how that works.
Okay, so there is a method to
sort it out, and availabilities and that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
And the ambulance service coordinates that.
Right. Okay, so because I actually recall Care Flight has a monthly magazine.
Yes,
was it?
I do.
Yeah, and Sonia was actually on the cover page with a whole funky helicopter helmet and everything. And, looking very, very professional. It was very cool. But I think that's so. What type of accidents would require a helicopter? Obviously, areas that are difficult to access, like a cliff face, makes sense.
Yes.
What else would you find yourself going?
So if the patient is critically injured and they might need intervention to stabilise them that only a doctor can do. So paramedics have enormous levels of training and can do a lot of stuff like intubation, but certain drugs, for instance, that need to be given can't be given by anyone but a doctor. And also if they're going to need advanced things like chest drains or actual procedures done at the side of the incident, then they will deploy the helicopter.
So the helicopter is the quickest way to the scene of the accident most of the time, I'm guessing.
So the same doctors will, for example, New South Wales Ambulance Service has access to road and helicopter at the same time with the same crew, so they will just change which vehicle they're going.
Oh, so they're at the hospital or wherever they happen to be. So they're at
their base.
So they can go via road or air.
And so a decision will be made once whatever the scenario is. They get the information and go, okay, this is the best way to get there, etc.
Oh, okay. So you might have a massive car accident and it's serious, it's messy, we need someone here quick, this is complicated, you would often, you could end up going,
So,
or a helicopter.
We've landed on motorways and bridges and, just parks and sort of things just to be as close to the accident as possible.
Wow.
And another large chunk of the retrieval job is also transferring critically ill patients. So like I said, if you're in a smaller hospital but you are needing intensive care level support and observation to get you to the other hospital, we certainly don't want you to end up going down in the level of care. So the helicopter or ambulance will come with a paramedic and doctor crew and look after them to actually retrieve them from one healthcare facility to another.
Wow. Do you guys need to do sea retrievals as well? Sorry, water?
Like
the beach?
So I know that the Newcastle helicopter service have had to pick up people off ships that are actually injured, but the ships aren't coming into dock.
Right.
So you have to go out to sea and actually land on the helicopter and land the helicopter on the ship and bring them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now, because, I mean, there may be people that think going, oh, wow, that sounds really cool. Like, being the doctor on the helicopter, I can see that being potentially very satisfying. Now, do you need, so what level of medicine accreditation do you need for that? Can you just be a registrar and you can jump on that, or do you need to be a specialist, or?
So, you need to actually training in that field.
When you say field?
In the field of retrieval medicine.
Oh, so there is a retrieval medicine.
Yeah, which is just why some of the critical care registrars will do it as part of their training.
Is that a specialty, or is that an area?
It's more like a subspecialty, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so generally, in order to actually get into that field, you need to be senior, a senior trainee at least in either anaesthetics, intensive care or emergency before they will accept you to train you in this, because you need a baseline level of skill in order to adapt it to a retrieval situation.
So a senior trainee in the path to specialising.
Yes, in critical care.
In critical care.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And since you are the specialty of emergency, this is all part of your role.
But there are plenty of critical care physicians of various types who have no interest in retrieval and don't do it. So it's an optional side thing. Yeah.
And obviously you're doing it on a casual basis because it's something that you enjoy.
I enjoy, and it's very different to the hospital, and basically would like to keep it as part of my career ongoing.
Now, I think I recall you actually had to do some non-medical specific training as part of some of your care flight stuff, like canyoning or something?
So as part of, if you're going to be, as a job being on a helicopter, you need actually to do some sort of training so that you are aware of all the safety implications and all that sort of thing. So I personally don't have to, because my section of care flight didn't do any winching. But if you're going to be on the thing where you put a stretcher on a piece of rope and you pick up someone off the bottom of a canyon, you have to be trained in how to look after a patient while you're dangling in midair and that sort of thing. So there is a lot of additional training which is not medically focused, but more focused in how to get the medicine that adapted to the non-hospital unpredictable situation that you're in.
Wow.
As well as just being part of a helicopter crew and keeping, for example, like I said, we don't plan these things, so we're not landing in air bases, we're landing in fields, we're landing in people's backyards, that sort of thing, and just the simple things of being part of the crew and clearing dangers. So obviously being a helicopter, you can't go near electrical wires, for example. And also you certainly don't want members of the public going, oh, that's exciting, and running towards you when the blades are going, and, that sort of thing.
Right. But with the canyoning stuff, you did was that training necessary as part of your care flight role?
Yeah, so basically when you're doing retrieval, you get to train in a lot of things that you may not necessarily use. Because, for example, disaster training, we run simulated scenarios where there's a house that's caught on fire and a dozen people have been injured and you need to sort out the triage.
Wow.
That actual situation is going to happen very rarely, but we are lucky enough that the retrieval program in Sydney is so good. You actually get experience in training those situations.
Okay. So, sorry, I keep coming to the canyoning thing because I think it's just really, really cool. So, but you actually had to develop skills because you're, I guess, simulating the situation where you will have to go down.
Yeah, so for us, when we did it, because the paramedics actually go through a far more rigorous training program than the doctors do in Sydney, if it actually came to a situation where people were stuck down a canyon and that sort of thing, they would not send the doctor down there as their number one thing. They would send the paramedic because they've actually been trained in water rescues and things that we don't get trained in.
Yes.
Because this is sort of their, they do the job for much longer than the short periods we do it for. So it was more to give us an understanding of the difficulties that are faced in a place like a canyon, where you are looking after a critically ill person, and the limitations of what you can do. Because I think it's very good and well to know, yes, we need to, do this, that, and the other, but then trying to figure out how to do it while the person is half submerged in water on top of slippery rocks and that sort of thing, and just to, I guess, dip our toes in the water to appreciate that situation.
Well, so generally the desirable situation is the paramedic goes down, gets the patient, brings them onto the helicopter, and you treat them on the helicopter. Yeah,
or to a stable area.
To a stable
area. Not actually on the helicopter.
And then they would land and you'd go. Would you be in a situation where you were winched down?
Doctors are. I personally don't do winching. But there have been several situations in the last year where more towards the coast, in the beach sort of areas, where the tide comes in and you can't actually access it by any other way.
Right. When you say you personally don't do winching, it's because you haven't done the training and it's a conscious choice.
Just the area that I work in doesn't involve winching. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. All right, so that's your, I guess, let's call it side, not really a hobby, but
side interest.
Side interest, which I think it's pretty. Downright, it's pretty. Inspiration might be the word, because your day-to-day job is I would say intensive enough. Would the layperson say? But no, you're willing to do more. And
it gives you I think for me as an emergency doctor, it gives you a very healthy appreciation for what all the ambos have to go through out on the scene. And when the patient turns up and they don't necessarily know everything, or the patient's not perfectly packaged. It just makes you go, you know what? Yeah. You did a great job.
Right. Oh, geez. Wow. Yep. No, definitely. They're always really underappreciated, aren't they? Especially those ambulance guys. But I personally, I've been I've been helped by them in the past. So every time I actually hear that siren, I'm like, you guys go do your thing. Right. Okay. So we'll close it off there for this transition piece, and we'll finally move on to rest. We've been talking for ages. Okay. So with rest, I always like to start off with, generally, how many hours of sleep do you get every night?
It varies because of my shift work.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
So you don't always get a choice sometimes, because if you have a run of days, then it's really great because you get to sleep like a normal person. But then when you're transitioning onto nights or from evenings back to days, that sort of thing, I tend to keep myself awake to prepare myself for whatever my next shift is. People do it in varying different ways, naps and then, keep it the other way. But so there are some times when I will deliberately make myself try to sleep more, until, don't set any alarms and try to sleep as long as I can. To gather the rest.
So you front load your sleep basically, right?
And some days when, sometimes the roster will be unfortunate and you work till midnight and have to be at work at 8 o'clock the next morning.
So I was going to ask, do they change your shifts like literally the next day? Like,
it can be depending on, varying places will have varying degrees of niceness about that. But sometimes, it's unavoidable.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yep.
But most people try to adhere to the, let's go in one direction sort of thing. So physiologically, we're adapted to actually go forward in time. So as in sleep later, wake up later. So ideally, you would be going day to evening to night shift. Yeah.
And
then you get a certain amount of break between night shift and having to come back to a day.
Okay. Yeah. But in the unfortunate event where there is a big shift, you could potentially do an all-nighter to, let's say, for example, you do a day shift, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Then your next shift is at midnight on that same evening.
Oh, yeah. So they don't do that. So for nights, are very well cordoned.
Oh, right.
For the ED guys, because we're constantly having to do them.
Right.
So if you are doing nights, you cannot be on work that day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you could actually be on the day before.
The day before, right. Yeah. Okay.
So generally, if I was having nights, I would actually stay up the whole night, the night before I started, and then try to sleep all day and change it, yeah.
Oh, so you sort of pre-adapted. Okay, so let's normalize this and say if you are just fortunate enough to have a week of just your day shift, 8 to 6 p.m., generally sort of how many hours of sleep are you looking at trying to get just on normal? You're not trying to front load or whatever?
I'd probably get 7 or 8.
7 or 8? All right. As a doctor, my understanding, as I was saying in the previous episode, my understanding is that is the recommended number of hours per sleep.
Yeah, for your average adult, yeah.
For your average adult.
That's not particularly why I do it.
You just,
It's just I get grumpy a lot.
Very good. And okay, so obviously that'll change with your shifts and whatnot. Now, just while we're just touching on this rest section, are there any sort of daily or regular specific rituals you live by or you like to stick to in your routine?
Now, being a doctor, I know this is terribly unhealthy, but one of my things that I've just gotten used to is that I don't have breakfast and I have a coffee.
Okay. Or coffee is your breakfast.
Yes.
And that's a recent thing.
No, it's
always been that?
It's been for a long time, but I think that's kind of because of shift work, you can be eating breakfast at 10 p.m. before your night shift and that sort of thing. So I think my body has just gotten used to, when I get coffee, that means that's the beginning of my day.
Oh, right. Okay. So, but why would that stop you from having breakfast?
Oh, no, it's just
the way.
It's just the habit I've fallen into. I don't particularly feel hungry when I wake up. Yeah.
Okay. And, okay. That's interesting. And you find that helps you sort of, like you said, that's a clear signal. Yeah. No food, but just coffee. That's your flag saying, right, new day starting. Yes. Doesn't matter what time of the day or night it is.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting. Is there anything else specific that you do in general or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I think being a shift worker has made me sort of the times that I eat meals and do anything is very fluid. So I think it's one of the things I had to really get used to is that you can't sign up for a class that runs every Wednesday on at 7 p.m. or anything like that because you can't actually guarantee that you won't be working that time. So, I mean, the upside is that because you're a shift worker, yes, you do work weekends, but there are weekdays that you'll have off. So everyone else will be at work, and you can go, go to the shopping centre or whatever, and not fight the crowds and that sort of thing. And there's something just unexplainably satisfying about on a Monday sitting and having coffee at my leisure while everyone else is at work. But but the payoff is that you do Saturdays and Sundays are not off limits. Yeah, so you will work. The way that it works for public hospitals is that every time you work a weekend, you do actually get a day in lieu added to your leave.
Okay,
but it means that you can be rostered on any weekends for the emergency department.
Okay,
yeah.
But for you now, it's Saturday, Sunday is.
It's less frequent, but still, yeah.
Okay. All right. Oh, it's better, I guess. I'm speaking of rest. I forgot to ask. Do you get a set lunchtime?
No.
During your shifts?
No.
So it's just whenever there's a lull.
Yeah.
Moment.
I mean, you get better at managing your own time and sort of setting it up so that you can eat at a reasonable hour and that sort of thing.
Right.
But unfortunately, if a very sick patient that is very attention intensive comes in, then that's just a period of time you cannot just walk away.
Right. So then my next question was going to be, well, do you get to do anything during your lunchtime, like go out and I don't know, but I guess not. It's just
generally,
have your food and
generally not. Like definitely any when you're in the emergency, you can't actually leave the hospital grounds during your shift because you may be needed.
Right.
In general, you're not supposed to, leave the hospital at all, no matter which part of the hospital you're working in during your shift. But in emergency, everything's cordoned off into the emergency department, so you will have your lunch in the tea room of the emergency where they can overhead you and call you back.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. Okay. That's I like to keep the rest bit short and sweet. So we'll leave it there. The next and the final section we'll go into is play. So we'll jump right into it. So are there any specific hobbies or special interests you pursue? Now, you've mentioned that it's difficult to attend classes and stuff with your shift work and stuff, but I mean, despite all that, are there any, what do you like to indulge in per se?
Well, on a, just a basic everyday unwind sort of thing, Netflix is good.
Netflix, yes. What are you watching of late?
So, Orphan Black was really good.
Orphan Black? I have not seen that.
I recommend. Canadian show.
Ah, okay.
I think one of the things was because, as I said, I just recently passed my exam. I went through a whole phase of basically not having any play. Any spare time I had, I was studying.
We should clarify. So actually, I should have clarified in the previous section, but so the exams that you passed were the final exams for the specialty for being an emergency specialist.
Yes.
And that's epic. So after that, so you've done your 5.5 plus X number of years of study, and now you are free.
Yes, essentially, if I choose to, I never have to do a major exam again.
That is fantastic. Okay, so that was completed 2 months ago.
So I got the results 2 months ago.
You got the results 2 months ago, right?
So I got the results in December, and I actually got to have some time off work and discovered that what free time is again, which was wonderful. Except because I'd had such a long time without free time, I was just enjoying anything.
Yes.
Being in my pajamas, sleeping, watching TV, being able to guilt-free be away from the books, or doing anything. So one of the things that I'm looking to do is actually find a hobby again. But in general, I enjoy being creative. But not in the usual way because I have no musical talent nor artistic ability. But sort of inventing fun things to do with my friends. So scavenger hunts and and the recent thing that's come into Sydney is the escape rooms and that sort of thing. I find
Escape
pretty
rooms.
fun.
Do you want to explain a little bit more about that for those who may not be familiar with
yes. So basically, it's a puzzle experience where you and a group of people get put into a room which has a different theme depending on where you go. But for example, you might be given the story of somebody has kidnapped you guys and you have to find a way to escape. And by solving a series of puzzles within the room, physical and mental, you find how to unlock the door to get yourself out.
Right, so there's specific venues out there where
that have designed it, and you're supposed to be able to do it within a certain time limit, usually about an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're like challenging logic type of problem solving.
Yeah.
Right. And when you mentioned scavenger hunts, so these are ones where you're organising scavenger hunts?
Yeah. So much to my friends' dismay, I've done a couple of ones in the past where I've set out a series of clues and that sort of thing, and they solve it, and we kind of go all across Sydney as the answers to the clues take you to a new place.
Yes, I recall. I was one of the stations, I believe. Yes, that was good fun. Wow. All right, so escape rooms, obviously you like to use your brain, be challenged, stimulated through that way. Is there what else is out there that you like to have fun with?
So one thing that I haven't gotten to indulge in for a while, again because of studying and things, but traveling.
Traveling. Oh, okay. As in overseas or?
Yeah, anywhere really.
Anywhere.
Yeah. So I tend to be the kind of person who likes to, whatever I do, be doing it with my friends. But I have done solo travel before, which I know certainly isn't for everybody, but I really enjoyed. So traveling through Nepal, I went to travel through there for a week on my own, and yeah, it was just an amazing experience. Yeah.
Are we talking backpacking or more just?
So the time that I went there, I specifically went there to visit the hospitals.
Oh.
At this stage, I was still a trainee, but I was looking into what kind of work I could do once I became a specialist in terms of working overseas to help developing countries and that sort of thing.
So is this you would literally contact hospitals and say, hi,
Yeah, so I found out that there was some expat Aussies who were doctors working in Nepal. So I just emailed them and said, hello, this is who I am, and do you mind if I come visit you? So I went to Kathmandu, visited the doctor there, and I also went to a smaller southern city called Dharan and went and visited a doctor there as well. Yeah.
Wow. So is that something that you'd still consider doing?
Yeah. It's now that I'm a specialist, I obviously have more options because when you want to do things like that, going overseas and things, they generally want you to be an autonomous doctor, if you know what I mean. That's how you are most valuable in terms of your skill set. But obviously, you know, it's a big cost because you actually have to be away from Sydney, and you know, if you're starting family and all that sort of stuff, things to consider there. But it is certainly something I'm still very interested in.
Wow! And what was your what are the hospitals like there over there?
So while I was there was a cholera outbreak, like there is every year. So in terms of the hospitals, the systems can be very similar, but Nepal is a developing country. Their health system is like most countries around the world, where if you can't pay, you can't get any services. So having done all my training and for most of my remembered life growing up in Australia, we're very privileged here to not only have like a standard of living that's pretty high, but also a healthcare service where you generally don't have to worry about how much anything costs. But there I got to see amazing sorts of stuff where basically the doctor will look at you, decide what you need, write it down on a piece of paper, and then you have to go over and pay for it.
No matter what your state.
So
you could be dying.
Yes. And it doesn't matter. And it's just an accepted part of life.
So what if you're not conscious or anything like that?
So if your family can't pay for it, you don't get it.
So if you don't have a representative of any means, you're not going to be treated on.
No one is going to preemptively do anything for you.
As opposed to in Sydney, to clarify for those who are listening, we have a Medicaid system where now correct me if I'm wrong, any sort of life-threatening injury, if you're taken to hospital, they will treat you.
Yeah.
And it's covered by the government-funded Medicare system.
So basically, as an Australian citizen, you're covered by Medicare for, pretty much any health, non-elective health costs. So, if you want plastic surgery, that's a whole other issue.
Right.
But, I, as a doctor in Australia, have never had to learn the cost of any of the things that I prescribe because the hospital will pay for it. But I've talked to doctors who've worked overseas who are literally like, well, this is a medicine that you could have, but it costs this much money.
That's tough.
Yeah. It was a very eye-opening experience.
Did you actually practice when you were in Nepal, or was just
no, because I was only there for such a short period of time. I didn't have time to sort of get cleared to practice there.
Now, this is interesting. Now, we're in the play section, and somehow we've managed to come back to medicine.
We've managed to come back to medicine.
Now, I think that's a good sign. So, obviously, you're passionate about your work, which I think if you are doing work that you're passionate about, then really there's not really much. I can't think of a better spot that you can be from a work perspective. So that's actually really cool.
I gotta say though, traveling in Nepal in itself, because it's the first time I'd ever traveled by myself, and not to be naive, being a woman traveling on your own anywhere is always a bit more dangerous than being a man traveling alone anywhere. But it was fantastic learning experience of my own because I don't speak Nepalese.
And there's not a lot of English over there, I assume.
No, and I have to say the best experience of my life has to be sitting in a cafe in Nepal, waiting to meet the doctor person who I knew there, and having the waiter come up. And I cannot speak to anybody on the streets because they don't speak English, they don't speak Nepalese. But the cafe that I was at was staffed by because it was a charity-run cafe, purely by deaf people who sign.
Oh.
And I, just out of interest, had learnt sign language.
Yes.
So Australian Sign Language, which is based on the British system. And Nepalese Sign Language is also based on the British system. So I was able to communicate with the waiter in sign, even though I couldn't talk to anyone in the country. And it was just amazing, yeah.
Of course, I forgot to ask you about that because I do remember. And you were fluent in sign language?
Certainly not 100% fluent, but I could have a conversation.
Wow.
So I was able, I ordered a Coke and I signed thank you to him, and he noticed that I was actually signing it rather than saying it. So we started a conversation. He said, "Are you deaf?" And I went, "No." And I'm from Australia. I'm visiting, and I actually didn't remember the sign for Korea because I'm of Korean heritage.
Okay.
And he had asked. So together, by talking to each other, he taught me the sign for Korea, and it was amazing. Yeah.
Wow. Do you still use your sign language?
Oh, certainly not as much as I'd like to. I still remember a bit. So occasionally we've had deaf patients come into the department, and I've been able to help out a bit there. Yeah.
Wow. Actually, I have contemplated learning sign language because one of my uncles is deaf.
Fantastic.
I too, being of Korean background, in Korea, the sign language is different. I thought it was an international standard, but English has their own. You got your British system. Does American have their?
Yeah, so American is completely different to the British system. So there's mainly a one-handed sign language, whereas British is a two-handed sign language.
And when I found that, I got very frustrated internally, and then I just sort of gave up because I'm like, if it was a universal thing, then I probably would have been all over it.
But as with
But
any
yeah.
other language, it's just developed
Of
all
course.
separately.
Right.
And so they'll have deaf conventions where deaf people from all over the world will come and they will need interpreters.
That'd be really cool to
Yeah.
see, actually.
It is. It's amazing.
Wow. That's a beautiful story. That's fantastic. What got you into learning sign?
There was a school that had a deaf community in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Parramatta or somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I caught the train home, I would see them signing with each other. And this was in high school.
Yes.
And I just thought, oh, that's interesting.
Yes, because we caught the same train.
Yeah.
Yes. And I do recall. And that's what triggered your curiosity.
And it just brought me back to it when I was doing med school, and I just wanted to do something that was just not medicine as a point of interest. And for some reason, I ended up doing that. And actually, when I was learning the course, a lot of people were learning sign language because they work at a school where there are deaf kids or something. Whereas I had absolutely no connection. Everyone was like, "Why are you doing this?"
Wow. So, but obviously there had to be an objective. You saw yourself as potentially wanting to help deaf people?
Yeah, I think basically these are people who are living, who are fully Australian, in whatever way that you want to define that, but are completely cut off from the health system, because trying to get a sign language interpreter at night is actually impossible, because usually interpreters during the night are telephone interpreters, and you can't use that for a deaf person.
Of course, yeah. Wow. So obviously, at a very early age, you were actively pursuing something to help others.
Oh, I mean, I've liked languages.
Yes.
In high school, I did Japanese and as one of my chosen subjects and that sort of thing. So I think it was just seemed interesting that there is actually a language that is native to Australia that I'd never learnt.
Wow, there you go. Wow, that's really good that you brought up. But that Nepalese deaf conversation stories. How good that would have been.
It was really amazing.
Really
I actually was sitting there kind of pinching myself. Thinking, is this really happening?
Wow. And of course the waiter would have just been absolutely...
Yeah, because the Nepalese population is varied in having more Indian sort of background to Asian sort of background. So there were plenty of people who sort of looked like me, who were Nepalese.
Oh.
But it was obvious from, the fact that I had my suitcase and the way I was dressed and stuff that I was a visitor. And for them to be able to communicate with a visitor was unusual. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Beautiful story. Are there any other hobbies or interests you want to talk about that come to mind?
At this stage, I am enjoying having some free time.
Yes.
I think that in itself, is. I actually spoke to one of the guys who went through the exam process, and they said the first time they realised that the exam process was actually over was 6 months after they had actually sat the exam, when they realised, let's buy a television. So it's actually a bizarre thing that you're asking me now, because I'm actually having to learn how to play again.
Wow. Okay, so you mentioned you are also in the process of potentially looking for another hobby to pursue. Are there any that are sort of on the potential list of hobbies you might look at? Or it's still very early days and not really?
Still very early days at the moment. I mean, I do. One thing that I haven't been able to do as much that I do really like is, in Australia we call it bushwalking, but hiking or whatever.
Right.
Which you don't really get the opportunity to do unless you can put a day aside to go and do it.
Correct.
So that's something I'd like to get back into.
So essentially hiking in the
actual
with nature.
Yes.
Right.
Outside of the city.
Right, of course. Very good. One thing I just wanted to come back to, escape rooms. If anyone wanted to sort of find out more about that, because I think that's something that may interest a lot of people who actually haven't come across that. Because how many people do you need to do that?
So I think in some rooms you can have just 2 people.
Right, so 2 or more.
Yeah, and some rooms are big enough to accommodate like 10 people.
Right, right. So it's obviously like a
group
combined
activity,
effort.
Yeah.
So it's like great team building or friendship making or breaking.
Yeah, well, yes.
And if someone wanted to find out more about that, should they just Google it, or is there a website?
If you actually Google escape room reviews,
room reviews,
yeah,
right.
there are people who have gone to more than one,
right,
and have kind of rated which ones are good and which ones are not so good and that sort of thing. And they're actually Australia's getting it late. Apparently, it's been happening around the world for a while.
Right.
And I've had friends who've done it overseas, and everyone. It seems that each country sort of has a different way of tackling it.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, the ones in China are apparently very physically interactive, Indiana Jones style.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So
okay. That just sounds very, very cool. Okay, very, very interesting. Okay, so towards the end of this section, we'll sort of tangent off into sort of a couple of other sort of generic questions.
Mm-hmm.
In general, obviously you're very successful at what you're doing. Is there anyone you would generally consider to have been a significant inspiration to you in your life thus far?
Just in general, or
just in general? Oh, it could be either or.
Oh. Career-wise, definitely there are certain people who I think for me it's been really a matter of the people who've been supportive of you as a person.
Mm.
I think, as it can be really, like we've touched on, it can be pretty confronting, some of the stuff that we have to do.
Mm.
And a lot of the time there can be sort of this attitude that, it's part of your job, suck it up, move on.
Mm.
But, recognizing that we all have our limitations and our good points and our bad points. If there have been a handful of people who've been extremely supportive of me as a person, going through all this, and that's been a big, big difference.
Would they be your seniors or colleagues or patients?
So in particular, that while I was a junior doctor, the seniors who recognised that, as with any career, when you're first starting out as a grad or whatever, you don't really understand the system necessarily or your place in it.
Mm.
And to help you navigate that process during the tough times is, I think, possibly not a big tax out of their day, but it just makes a big difference to the poor old newbie who's floundering.
Of course, yes. Okay. What about in life in general? Is there any...
In life in general wise, I'd definitely say my parents.
Wow.
Yeah. Being, immigrant family sort of thing. I guess now that I've come to the sort of age group they were when they brought us to Australia, I find it a fascinating concept that they picked up their young family and moved to a country they don't speak the language of or had ever laid eyes upon.
How old were you when you came here?
I was 5.
5 years old. Wow. Okay. So, I mean, the fact that they had to, I guess, go through the hardships of moving across. Was there a main reason? Did they come here for, I don't know, was there a specific reason they came over, or was it more just generic search for a better life? Or
Yeah, I think it was the generic sort of stuff, just wanting for my brother and I to have opportunities that they didn't.
Right.
And I think there was a big push around that time, especially in Korea, to go to English-speaking nations.
Right, especially at that time, I think Korea was still very much recovering from, that would have been about the 80s.
Yeah.
So it's still very much a developing country, much more so than, I guess, it's developed a lot now today. Okay, very cool. So parents and seniors in your previous role, have you had any specific mentors or anything like that per se for your career perspective?
Not particularly who identified themselves as mentors.
Yeah.
But people who have become such, definitely. As you go, I have done a lot of my training in one specific network of the hospital, so I've gotten to know some of the seniors through there.
Yep.
And as, you know, it's the people who you look at and you see how they deal with things and you admire how they do that. You know? Yeah.
So not a formal mentor-mentee relationship necessarily?
Yeah.
Or was it a formal thing?
There was no formalized sort of mentor-mentee sort of thing.
Sure. Okay. Very cool. All right, last formal question for this segment. I asked it last one, and I'm going to ask it again. It's come from various sources, and there are very many versions of this. But I'll ask it. If you could go back in time and chat with yourself, you did mention something like this not too long ago. But if you could go back in time and chat with yourself 20 years ago, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, God. Enjoy.
This is why I love this question.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Doesn't have to be a long. I think that is wise words. Okay, last bit. We're going to finish off with some fun. Okay. Not that this hasn't been fun, but just some questions literally just for fun. I did this with Dennis as well. We're going to have some rapid fire questions if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
So pretty much what we're going to do in 60 seconds for 1 minute, I'm just going to throw random questions at you.
Okay.
The objective...
throw random answers?
Yeah, well, the objective is literally just to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. And we want to get through as many questions as we can. I'm going to change it up. They're not going to be necessarily the exact same questions that I asked last time.
Okay.
So we'll get right into it. What I'm just going to do is I'm just going to set this up for a sec. Just give me 1 sec. And like I did last time, I'm going to use my awesome ticker, which I found on YouTube. Now, last time I mentioned it was really hard to find, and it probably doesn't make a lot of sense why it was so hard to find. And I'll tell you why. I'm sure you were all very interested in why. It's because every single ticker I found on YouTube had all these annoying sound effects behind it and extra music. And I just wanted your basic 60 minutes. And I finally found it. So, okay, are we ready? We're going to jump right into it.
Sure.
Good old rapid fire questions. Oh, so just first thing that comes to mind, no right or wrong.
Okay.
If nothing comes to mind straight away, just you can say pass and we can come back to it later if we have time. Simple as that.
Good.
All right. So I'll start it after I ask the first question. And what movie did you really like?
Recently, Deadpool.
What song do you really like? What song do you really like?
Oh, song. Adele's Make You Feel My Love.
Okay, if you could meet anyone in person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Ooh, Jesus.
Okay, which celebrity do you find super hot?
Ryan Reynolds.
Hey, what do you love about this world?
Oh, it's just amazing.
Usually the first thing you do in the morning?
Brush my teeth.
The last thing you do at night?
Brush my teeth.
Food you really love?
Dennis.
Food you really love?
Oh, gosh. Chocolate.
Okay, who do you find to be really inspirational?
My parents.
Who do you think is a real douche?
Pass.
Is there a divine creator?
I think so.
Favorite subject at school?
Japanese.
Will robots rule over the world? Can answer that? Well, you don't have to. Okay, we'll pass on that one. Thank you very much, Sunny. You have been tremendously gracious with your time.
That's fine.
As was Dennis. Thank you so much. Wishing you all the best. And away we go. Let's enjoy life.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
And that's it for episode 5. A big thank you to Sunny once again for being so generous with her time. Now, in the next episode, we will be introducing a new guest. And to give you a little clue on what it's about, our next guest manages resources of the humankind. So stay tuned for that and check it out when you get a chance. Also, if you've been enjoying the episodes and you'd love to support the show, there is a way. You can become a patron via patreon.com. That is patreon.com. And you can find us by searching for We Work, Rest and Play, all one word, from the Patreon homepage. You'll gain a bunch of exclusive access and benefits, so definitely worth checking out. Every little bit of support is a huge help and goes a very long way in keeping this show alive. And of course, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast via your favorite podcast app to make sure you automatically receive new episodes. And if and when you feel like it, it would be great if you could spend just a few seconds to leave a review to let me know what you think about the show. You can also refer to the website, weworkrestandplay.com for the show notes, and looking forward to speaking with a brand new guest in the next episode. And so, until then, live life, take care, and keep smiling. The intro and outro music is an extract from the track entitled Falling Down by the artist named Ryan Little and is used in accordance with the Creative Commons Attribution License. Thank you very much, Ryan. Further references can also be found in the show notes at www.weworkrestandplay.com.